more than anything else, they remember what it felt like to skate.
The swiftness, the feeling, the freedom. There's a wonderful feeling of gliding on ice.
Lacing up figure skates and stepping out onto that ice served as a woman's declaration of freedom.
Skating backwards fast and having the wind blowing your hair. I don't know, just maybe like flying. You just feel you're free.
The chance to win an Olympic medal by swooping and soaring was almost too impossibly romantic to be true.
Beautiful snow-capped mountains, clear blue sky. I think I was in heaven. I mean, I just loved it.
Ice has a live feeling, warm, velvet, soft.
To be a ladies figure skater in the first half of this century was to be a lady, to dress a certain way and represent your club or your country with style and grace. But all the style in the world didn't matter if you couldn't skate a straight line or carve out a figure eight. The sport was called figure skating for a reason.
You had to have excellent figures to be allowed to free skate.
It was a drawing. A figure was a drawing. And you were drawing with your blade instead of with your hand.
To be sure, back in those idyllic days of ladies figure skating, the ice wasn't always so smooth, nor the competition so fair, or the judging so keen.
It was very political back in those days. You put my pair first, I'll put your single first. There was a lot of that going on.
This wasn't a sport as we know it today, but a cross between an athletic endeavor and the Miss America pageant.
I always tried to make it beautiful every time I did it. I wanted everyone to watch me.
Still, nothing could diminish that joy. Eyes sparkling, gloriously dancing, on a pair of freshly sharpened white skates, under the winter sun.
There were so many things very different skating outdoors. Sometimes we'd even shovel our own area for practicing school figures.
At the turn of the century, ice skating was a diversion fit for a lady, a socially acceptable way to take the outdoor air. It was a means for men and women to court in public, to be seen holding hands without causing shock. But figure skating, the sport, was purely a male domain. In those days, no one but the rabid suffragettes believed women should even be athletes at all. So imagine the commotion a British housewife named Madge Syers caused when she arrived with her husband Edgar at the 1902 World Championships in London. Madge hadn't merely come to watch, but to compete against the men.
They were horrified, probably. But then they realized that there was nothing in their rules that prevented a woman from competing with men, so they allowed her to compete. She was not representing equal rights for women particularly, she was representing her own right to compete.
Not only did she compete, she finished second behind Sweden's Ulrik Salchow, who would ultimately win 10 world titles. Only this skating immortal stood between Syers and the World Championship, which men had been contesting among themselves since 1896.
There is only one world champion, and that's the man, even today. In our rules, we still call women ladies. It's the World Ladies Championship. So there's this concept of the male protecting the female, I suppose. And, Madge kind of broke that by showing she could skate with the men.
4 years later, in 1906, the Skating Union organized a separate competitive event for ladies. Appropriately, Madge Syers won this twice. In 1908, in her final competition, Madge underscored her name in the history books by winning the first Olympic gold medal in ladies figure skating. World War I then intervened, canceling the Olympic Games. Madge Syers did not live to see her Olympic successor. In 1917, she died in childbirth at the age of 35. Her daughter Virginia died as an infant. In 1920, the Olympics encompassed both summer and winter sports. The six-time U.S. champion Teresa Weld paid her own way to Belgium to compete. There, she caused some controversy.
She was marked down in her free skating, she says, because she did elements of jumps, simple jumps, we would think of them today, in which her skirt went up. And she was criticized for that. The feeling among the men was that the women should not display their legs.
But if the fashion of the day, long dresses, kept the lady skaters earthbound, it also helped them fight the elements. At the time of the first Winter Olympics in 1924, figure skating was usually contested out of doors. Rinks were shared with hockey players or public sessions or speed skaters. There were still problems in Switzerland 4 years later.
Oh, that was the Olympics in 1928. Because you see, St. Moritz didn't have an artificial skating rink. It was out of doors. And the stadium was impossible to skate on. It had no ice. So we skated at the Kulm Hotel rink. And the whole rink, they couldn't use part of it. They kept as clean as they could, and there were little holes. And so they put flags in. So you had to skate around those flags. The Olympics, you had to skate around those flags. You had to be careful.
Oh, there was no such thing as a Zamboni. I think it was in Davos, just before the competition, the snow people went on strike. So we had to go out earlier and shovel off our own area and then practice.
It was an awful problem. It really was, because, I mean, you had to practice in a snowstorm, you had to practice when it was windy. In Vienna, you practice when the rain was falling down, that sort of thing, and that made the ice very, very difficult.
European skaters had an advantage over American skaters. They had access to outdoor rinks, which allowed them to anticipate weather conditions they might encounter in competitions. Americans were referred to as hothouse skaters because they spent all of their time practicing indoors. As competitions approached, they looked for ways to skate out in the elements. In the 1950s, New York City Mayor Robert Wagner heard that Carol Heiss of Queens had talent, but needed outdoor ice time. He offered her early morning use of the world-famous rink at Rockefeller Center.
You feel like you're really in a hole. I'd look up and here would be all these people looking down at me, you know, on their way to work. So it wasn't really the most enjoyable kind of training, but at least it gave me an idea of what it was like to skate in the wind. When it would rain, Mr. Bernay would be thrilled. Oh, good, now we can do sections of the program. We can try to fit it in because it's raining. In exchange, it was sort of understood that once in a while, my sister and I would happen to come by Rockefeller Center and we'd give an exhibition for the people shopping.
The Heisses were a family of modest means. The cost of outfitting the three Heiss children for skating lessons were substantial.
Well, nothing was free. We had to pay for everything. Our coach, Mr. Bernay, bought a pair of skates or helped pay for the costume. 20 or 25 minutes is about $6 for your skating lessons, so it would be about $18 an hour. Most people didn't take an hour because they couldn't afford it.
You had to be the champion of the United States in order to get your way paid to world. So if you were second or third place, you had to pay your own way.
A young lady who wanted to be a world-class skater joined a skating club. There she'd train and learn the etiquette of the sport. Skating clubs originated out of the simple interest and joy of having a place to skate. But for most of the century, These clubs maintained an elitist attitude about membership.
Usually these private clubs had a membership committee, and you could be blackballed for any reason, whether you were from a certain ethnic group or your parents weren't in a certain profession. I remember I brought a membership application to my father in which he had to put down how much he made and what he did for a living, and he handed it back to me and he said, "Frank, just forget this. It's none of these people's business what I do or how much money I make."
The New York Skating Club was a very prestigious, kind of snooty club. You know, they didn't want some riffraff young kid. We don't care if she's national champion, you know, in here. But ultimately, there were a few people that got me in.
Only a tiny segment of the population even knew about skating clubs. In 1929, only 15 American skating clubs existed. Although women participated in athletics in the 1920s, sports were a world dominated by men, like Red Grange and Babe Ruth, Bobby Jones and Jack Dempsey. Women could wear their hair bobbed and dance the Charleston, but the thought of a figure skater capturing American hearts would have seemed absurd. And then it happened.